office, Dr. Holtz-Eakin has also served on the Council of Economic Advisors as the chief economist and a senior staff economist, in addition to directing domestic and economic policy for the John McCain presidential campaign, and serving as commissioner of the congressionally chartered Financial Crisis Inquiry Commission.
Okay. Try this. Okay. Good afternoon, Chairman Heinrich and committee members. My name is Courtney Eichhorst, and I'm the business manager for the United Association Local Number 412, which represents just over 2,000 plumbers, pipe fitters, and HVAC workers in New Mexico and El Paso, Texas. I also serve as the president of New Mexico Building Construction Trades Council. I'd like to thank the committee for the opportunity to share my thoughts on how the best in-class apprenticeship and pre-apprenticeship programs offered by the United Association of Plumbers and Pipe Fitters and the building trades are empowering our unions to meet the workforce demands driven by the clean energy transition and to construct and maintain. At the UA, we see every clean energy job as an opportunity to train workers for the next clean energy job. This is exactly why attaching labor standards that include apprenticeship utilization to federal investments in clean energy is so important. To meet the demands for skilled workers, the UA and North America's building trades unions put our money where our mouth is. Together with our signatory contractors, we invest nearly $2 billion each year in apprenticeship and journey-level training programs. Of this amount, the United Association, or the UA as we commonly refer to our union, alone invests about $280 million annually. These training investments consist entirely of private, non-taxpayer dollars. Unlike the traditional four-year college program, the five-year apprenticeship developed by the UA and other building trades unions provide individuals with the unique opportunity to earn while they learn. Apprentices in our programs are paid an increasing scale of wages as they progress, receiving health care coverage and becoming participants in retirement plans. They graduate as journeymen and women, debt-free, and with skills that are in high demand. In addition to our gold standard apprenticeship programs, the UA and other building trades unions are also increasingly investing in pre-apprenticeship programs that can be designed to help prepare high school students or individuals from underrepresented communities and others for a career. 412 has numerous apprenticeship initiatives that have proven to be highly successful in creating a pipeline between the communities we serve and family supporting careers in our industry. More details about these programs are found in my written testimony. They include a 12-week accelerated weld program and a partnership with 14 different high schools in remote areas of New Mexico. This large jump in apprenticeship speaks for itself as to the success of our initiatives. While I'm exceptionally proud of the work that we have done at Local 412, there are similar stories to be told throughout the United Association. For example, this past June, the UA and Capture Point Solutions committed $310,000 to a new pre-apprenticeship program in Vernon Parish, Louisiana, which will create a training and employment pipeline between high school juniors and seniors in Vernon Parish and a new carbon capture hub being developed in central Louisiana. The UA has also led the way in partnering with the U.S. military to train and place veterans into our apprenticeship program through our award-winning VIP, or Veterans in Piping program. This program, which is described in my written testimony, currently operates in 7 different military bases, and since its inception has provided apprenticeship opportunities for over 3,170 military veterans. I would like to end my prepared testimony by sharing my personal experience of coming up through Local 412 apprenticeship program, which I think illustrates the value of earn as you learn. Unlike many of my fellow UA brothers and sisters, I went through a 4-year college program and obtained a bachelor's degree in marketing and sales from New Mexico State University before beginning my union apprenticeship. However, when I applied to Merrill Lynch for a job straight out of college, I was told that I needed to. When I heard this, I thought, what was the point of my 4-year college program if they didn't provide me with the experience I needed for a career? So I simply could not find a job in New Mexico that paid well and would provide me with the training that I apparently still needed. So ultimately, I reassessed the path I was on and joined Local 412 apprenticeship program. The journey that decisions put me on has been immensely satisfying, and giving other men and women the same opportunity is what motivates me to focus on expanding our apprenticeship training at Local 412. In conclusion, the UA and the building trades are prepared to meet the workforce demands of the clean energy transition because we have the best training programs and the best model. Thank you all.
President Hartzler.
Good afternoon, Mr. Chairman and members of the committee. My name is Tracy Hartzler. I'm the president of Central New Mexico Community College, or C&M. I also serve on the board of directors for the American Association of Community Colleges, that's based here in Washington, D.C. So thank you very much for the opportunity to be here today to discuss the significant need for a much larger workforce pipeline to support the accelerating growth of the clean energy economy in New Mexico and certainly across the country. C&M serves over 30,000 students annually in about 200 certificate, degree, and training workforce programs that range from our trades, our skilled trades, to our arts programs that allow students to transfer on to universities, but also to enter into the workforce directly. We welcome students from all backgrounds. We are a Hispanic-serving institution, and we serve a significant population of tribal band and nation members from our New Mexico tribal bands and nations. Our students and learners include high school students taking dual credit classes, both in trades programs, but also general education programs. And then also we have adult learners who are seeking a quick way to enter the workforce. I want to share a story about one of our students named Rita, who was struggling to make ends meet working in a restaurant for tips in a low wage. But she realized she had 2 children. She couldn't really help to provide for them sufficiently. So she decided to enter a clean energy industry. She started in our electrical trades program, and within 2 years completed that program, is now at a local electrical company, providing a range of services. She owns a car, she owns a home, she's able to provide for her family. But we have the resources, this critical student supports that are so helpful in wrapping around that learner to help them not only enroll, but persist and complete their program. So just as we support our students like Rita, we also work incredibly closely with our employers. We exist to serve local workforce needs and to grow our local economies. So we frequently work with employers to spin up quick programs, to review our programs, revise our programs, to make sure they are continuously relevant not only in our existing industries that are common, but in our new industries, like our clean energy industries. And C&M isn't unique to this. All of the community colleges in New Mexico, but again, all of your districts and states do the same thing. We serve our students and we serve our employer needs to grow our local economies. So in my written testimony, I highlighted the variety of associate and degree certificate programs in solar and wind technology that C&M, many of the community colleges in New Mexico provide, including Navajo Tech as well. They focus mostly on installation and some of our maintenance skills, but again, these are entry points into a career in an industry where we again continue to provide upskilling and pathways for individuals once they enter those industries. So just as C&M's programming is evolving to meet changing demands, conversation with an international company who is choosing to move their manufacturing facility to the U.S. So as that facility or that company was able to take advantage of tax credits, both from the Inflation Reduction Act, also with many state tax credits to not only build the facility, they are working with federal and state-funded workforce development funds and partnering with C&M to help train their 1,800 employees who will be coming online here in the next about 18 months. So again, like most community colleges, we are challenged, I am challenged with providing and developing strong that many of you supported in the last couple of years. In addition, the American Association of Community Colleges supports continuing the Strengthening Community College Training Program and Strengthening Institutions Act. Again, those are included in both the House and the Senate Labor Human Services appropriation bills. We're pleased with those. But we also seek recurring funding. We use some of that from the federal and the state government as well. Again, we also are grateful for the support that the federal government provides to our students who seek access. So I would encourage the Congress to consider supporting Workforce Pell so that individuals who are seeking that quick entry into the workforce and that quick start into a career that's going to be successful for them and serve our communities, including our clean energy sector, that they are able to use federal grant dollars in addition to a lot of the other state supports that we're able to provide. So with that, I just want to say that it's critical that community colleges receive the federal support for jobs programs. There's no question that employers come to community colleges to design and provide responsive programming, and that learners come to us to find a better life and the resources, then the programs they need to help them achieve their goals. We are trusted, we are valued, we are capable, and that's why employers and students come to us. So Americans clearly understand the important role and value that community colleges provide, and I think with the support that we need, I'm confident that we will be able to continue to provide the workforce solutions that our communities and states require to support the booming clean energy economy, not only in New Mexico, but across the country. Thank you.
Dr. Beach, the floor is yours.
Very good. Thank you, Mr. Chairman, ranking member, members of the committee. It's a real pleasure to be here and be on this panel with my colleagues to talk about this extremely important topic. And I'm just really pleased, Mr. Chairman, that great demand for new labor in this growing sector. And the 3R, and I'll start with program effectiveness. I think this is a really important one. It's a classic one when we're talking about government training programs. I'm sure you're all familiar with this. It turns out that directly funded and managed training programs by federal agencies, job retraining in particular, not so much adult education, which seems to be quite effective, but training for a job or job retraining, they just don't seem to be as effective as we want them to be. The people who enroll in this training may be not typical of the class of people that you would normally think needs the training. And so there's a self-selection problem, which is a classic issue with the training programs. And not controlling for that particular, what's called unobserved characteristics, is what makes these appear to be effective, but really not effective. So how does Congress determine effectiveness? And here's where you need to build this into your legislation if legislation moves forward. You need to have what are called randomized tests. So you pick people who would be in the program at random, rather than having them identify themselves. And you pick people who are in the program, and you pick people who are not in the program and are different. Did they have different outcomes? When Mathematica did this study for the Department of Labor, I was not at Labor at that time, it was just before I started my term. They looked at a whole host of programs, from job training, Job Corps, about 40 programs. And they did these randomized tests for a number of these programs. Sadly, they didn't find too many of them to be effective. What is effective is what's happening in the private sector, and certainly in the joint efforts of labor unions and private companies to train. And so we need to study, why are those effective? I want to have a lot of data that tells you what is the demand for these jobs. And these data need to be produced by a statistical organization. BLS stopped producing those data in 2011. I'd be happy to discuss the reasons why. And at that time, for the green jobs data which they were producing, they found that there were about 2.1 million green jobs in the United States. That's 2011. I took the liberty of just updating that number, and when you update that number for the larger labor force, you get about 5 million green jobs in the country. There are many different ways of figuring out what the green jobs are, but you're going to want to have that detail. I produce a chart in my written testimony that lays out all the occupational characteristics that BLS was able to produce. It is crucial, if you're going to pursue the area of green jobs in a systematic way as congressional policy, that you have those data in front of you. But they're costly, and that's my third point. Congress is severely challenged, as you all know, you're working on this right now, to bring its fiscal house in order. We've had a 53% increase in publicly held debt. We've had a 42% increase in outlays just in the last 4 years, just unprecedented increases. And what has paid for your increased outlays? What has paid for that? Recent work by Robert Hall, and only 7% came from tax revenues. 76% from bonds, and 14% from money creation. So to conclude, you have some challenges in front of you, and I think you need to confront those honestly and directly, and I'm sure you will. And then you need to say, how can we pay for these jobs programs that we're going to fund? Clearly, given the fiscal challenges, that kind of outlook.
Just jobs in the economy, and there's nothing special about them. Sure, they could have some firm-specific or occupation-specific skills that you need to have, but that's true all through the U.S. economy. And it's a standard problem in workforce development to develop and deliver those kinds of skills to workers so that they can be effective in their careers. So this is something that, by and large, we have confronted before, and by and large, there are enough private sector incentives for firms to deliver that, to make sure that their workers can be effective in their jobs, or other private sector actors. You've heard from some already, unions and others deliver that training. And so that seems to me to be the real lesson of where we are right now. And it suggests several very simple principles for policy going forward. The first is there is no need to set up a large, new, dedicated, clean or green energy workforce development effort. Instead, that notion should be put aside, and existing routes of training should be pursued. I would echo what Dr. Beach said about the success of federal training programs. If you look at things like the Workforce Innovation Opportunity Act and the adult and displaced worker training programs there, in our work, when we looked at that, what you found is lots of people got trained for jobs that didn't exist anymore, and there was lots of demand in new jobs, and those people didn't have the skills to fill them. This is an area where there's going to be a terrible track record of delivering would be a mistake. Instead, all of the efforts should be on private sector training, supporting these collaborative efforts that we've seen across the country that have been successful for a long, long time in meeting the labor force needs of local businesses, and using registered apprenticeships wherever possible because they have the best record of success there as well. So I think this is an important topic and a good hearing, and I look forward to answering your questions.
Vice Chairman, we held your opening, so the floor is yours.
Well, with our staff and this and that, because there had been some history for those of you who've been on the committee before where sometimes we were cranky towards each other. But one of the things we tried to actually looking at is what's the definition of a green job? And this may go to my friend with the history in BLS. If we actually as a committee or even for staff, maybe it would be really smart for us to build sort of a universal definition. And the reason for that is you get those of us in the political class who get up all the time and say, this bill will create this many jobs or this many jobs. Wouldn't it be nice to actually have at least a common benchmark, whether it be on the right and the left, what the hell we're talking about? Second thing is, we have a couple things going on in the House, and I apologize, we're a little distracted, but I'm working on it. But, and it may be 20, 25 years ago, there were actually some attempts to do some pretty detailed research of the job training programs of the 1990s. And the juxtaposition, I remember it was a long study, it was an academic one, and it talked about programs that had reached out, and I love my community college. I'm from Maricopa, I got an AA from my community college, biggest I think maybe in the country. But the data set that came from that said the government-sponsored training that used these educational facilities, what primarily was happening is when the graduates came out, they had to be retrained at the business level for the business mechanisms there that maybe the fastest way we reach productivity and participation in, as you want to call it, the green economy, is not a surreptitious route through a government sponsor. I'm a pack rat, it's in one of my binders. But I remember even then, many years ago, the cost per job of the training was outlandish. And a fraction of that might have been a much healthier incentive, but it has to be carefully designed for the relationship between that employee and employer to have sort of a modeled apprentice program. It actually steals some of the brilliance some of the industrial unions have created, saying, but allow it to be an individual contract with an individual employer to learn their skill set, because it turns out if I get my electric certificate on how to put up electric photovoltaic panels, I may be able to go do other types of electrical. We need to make sure that this job training has the flexibility that our arrogance, which often leads us down a bad path, is green energy, every type of job, is going to probably look different 5 years from now, just like it did 5 years ago. How do we make our education flexible so we're making people so they have a productive life instead of we wall them off from their future? And with that, I yield back.
Great. Well, we will start with questions and alternate back and forth. And I want to start with you, Mr. Eichhorst, and I want to make clear, I actually don't call these green jobs. These are just jobs. And the thing I do like them where you can really build a family around these skilled trades jobs. How important are these types of programs in preparing young people for careers in the trades? The programs that start before you get to the graduation of your high school. Because I think one of the things that we hear that changed over the course of the last 30 to 40 years is this idea that if you don't get a 4-year degree, just forget about it. And now we're in this position where we really need skilled trades. And the demand signals in New Mexico, I mean, some of this has been mentioned, but 1,800 factory work, more skilled trades people just building the fab at Intel right now. And, you know, every job we don't fill is going to be filled by somebody coming from out of state, and we want to build long-term capacity. So how important is it for us to be working with the high schools to get this stuff, the career technical education back in the high schools to create an on-ramp for apprenticeships?
Thank you for that, Chairman Heinrich. I appreciate the question. When I went through high school in the 90s, we did have shop classes. We had welding classes, we had automotive. I wouldn't have finished high school if it wouldn't have been for welding classes. I was bored to death sitting through some of those classes. And because I had the ability to go out and weld, go make pig feeders, go make different things, I stuck it out. And then I went to college just to prove everybody wrong that I wasn't going to, I think. But right now, perfect example, Los Alamos National Laboratories. They're going to demand an additional 1,500 craft workers. That's just the men and women that build the facilities by 2026. Espanola Valley is a beautiful part of the state. It's one of the most beautiful areas in America as far as I'm concerned, but they've had issues with dropout rates. They've had issues with drugs. They've had a lot of issues in the past. What this does, when we get to go in and talk to these students before they graduate high schools, we let them know, look, you need a high school diploma. You need to start you down the right path. You're going to be making money. You're going to have insurance like nobody else has. You're going to have pension, real retirement plans that nobody else has. All you have to do is keep your act together, keep your nose clean, graduate high school. We'll teach you how to weld. We'll teach you the electrical and family's existence. You'll be able to afford a home. You'll be able to do what you need to do with a spouse and children and all the exciting things that, you know, most of us wanted with the American dream. As we get to these high school students and we can do these apprenticeship readiness programs, we get through the OSHA 10, we get through the first aid CPR, we get through the basics that every high schooler should have. I've had apprentices come in at 18, 19, 20 years old. They've never swung a hammer. They've never used a shovel. They weren't lucky like I was to have a dad that forced us to do manual labor and actually made us get outside and clean the stalls and work on the pens and take care of the animals. I was lucky. But a lot of these kids never had that opportunity. So if we get to them young enough and we explain, look, you like working with your hands, you like working on a computer. A lot of our jobs now are very technologically advanced. So we get to them younger, they have a career path, they think, oh my gosh, I have something to stay in school for. I have something to look forward to. Maybe I shouldn't go try some drugs. Maybe I shouldn't do something stupid. Maybe I should stick with this. We get them in these programs and our instructors came from the same place. Maybe they had colorful past, maybe they had a crazy childhood, and they can explain to these young men and women, look, you have a heck of an opportunity for a long-term career. So thank you for that question. It's good opportunity to get these students in as early as possible and get in front of them, let them know that they have a lot of opportunities.
Vice Chairman Schweikert.
in Phoenix. I have a full welding setup. I was not allowed to marry my wife, are all master welders.
For the record, Mr. Eichhorst knows this, but I actually did a DIY on a heat pump over the August break.
Really?
Just for the fun of it.
Oh, God, now I need to put up my plumbing so you and I could maybe start a video competition. As long as we're not both on a desert island, right? Okay, that's sort of internal joke. But now to a point of seriousness, and this is actually, I need my 2 PhDs to actually bounce on something. Degrees or, has chosen military, this and that. What's my actual population that's available to become a skilled craftsman, a skilled, journeyman?
Sure, every year we get about 2 million people who enter the labor force.
Okay.
Some of those are from foreign countries, and some of them are native born. We've got about 5.5 million people who have dropped out of the labor force, but tell us each month that they would like a job if a job was available to them, and we ask them, why don't you find that job? And they say, well, it's either training or I've been out too long and my skills are... So I would say the available labor force at a minimum is between 7 and 10 million people.
Really? Okay, I didn't have you as high as 10, but we've been reflecting the 7 and looking at... So, because one of the misalignments is, 7, and then we will hear things saying, but there's 20 million jobs.
Right.
And tell me, from your expertise, what's my misalignment right now of just raw population, skilled or but who's not in that labor participation and available labor opportunities?
Well, first, the biggest one is space. A job may be in New York, but the person who is looking for a job may be in California, and so they can't travel to the job. So that's a big one.
And Dr. Holtz-Ekren, one of the things that's coming back to us, particularly on this type of labor skills, is particularly, you have a great wind asset, as New Mexico has one. You build, but then it's over. And now you're back into a migration requirement. It's sort of the urban-suburban issue compared to where so much of green, let's call them green jobs for right now, for lack of a better definition, are often in rural, more difficult areas. The reality...
We've had state-to-state labor migration for a long, long time in the United States. That I'm not worried about. The more difficult part will be the public services, the police, fire, schools in places that did not have those populations before, getting those up to scale quickly as they're building these projects.
But then you have the second half, then those populations disappear. It's sort of like the dam economics of, there's some great stories like, for my Lake Pleasant, Lake Mead, populations, and then they crash.
Yeah, it's the recurring fixed costs of just doing it in different spots. And I'm not worried about getting people from place to place, but the fixed costs you're going to incur in those places are real.
If you were to approach this whole subject, what's my most elegant way of building a well-skilled population that's available for at least this and future technology? What would you do?
So number one, it's not about the money. First of all, there isn't any money. I'll just stipulate that. And then, we have spent about $200 billion since 2001 on graduate medical education, and there aren't nearly enough doctors, nurses, physician's assistants. It's not about just money. And the second thing I'd say, the lesson is, don't try to bring something to scale. President Hartzler is doing a great job. Do not replicate that all across the country, because it's a great job in that location for that demand for labor with those firms. And we repeat this error all the time. Decentralize this as much as possible. Do it at the local level through the private-public partnerships and or private firms. That's going to be the most successful way to do it. And certainly don't try to create green jobs. Create jobs that could be green or blue or yellow. Give people skills that are transferable from sector to sector, because we don't know what this will look like in 5 years.
Dr. Holtz-Ekren, thank you. You got to my punchline without me having to say it. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Senator Klobuchar.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair, and thank you for holding this very, very important hearing. Couldn't be more timely with everything happening. I guess I'll start with you, Mr. Eichhorst. Talk about the debate stage that kept saying we're not going to have a shortage of sports marketing degrees. We're going to have a shortage of electricians and plumbers and, of course, nurses and doctors. And I pissed off everyone that had a kid with a sports marketing degree, but if it really worked well for me. But if you could answer the question.
Absolutely. Thank you for that. I'll answer it to the best of my ability. Allowing policies to require registered apprenticeship programs, that's one of the things you just talked about. That's been fantastic, and that helps increase the amount of apprentices needed, right? But making it on a local level helps a ton too. If you go to an area that has predominantly not done anything that could be considered green or energy type, they may not need very many apprentices. So if you go to the areas that need them, you can train there, you can train for what they need, and those skills can be transferred anywhere in the country. And I'll give you an example. What's nice about the unions that I'm used to is, so the UA, we're across the entire United States, from Seattle to Florida. If you're training for a med gas certification to build hospitals, and I know this isn't clean energy, but this is an easy example, you're doing the exact same training in California as you are in New York. You're doing the same training in Seattle as you are in Florida. So if we're working on a very specific type of alloy or type, they had some different things we weren't used to. We developed a training program in Albuquerque. We were extremely successful with it. We did a great job. We had apprentices welding on this facility because they went through the UA's, our welding standards are extremely stringent. They went through the UA's weld program. They were certified. Those same students went up to Malta, New York to weld on Global Foundries. Some of them are in Phoenix right now.
Senator Moran and I have a bill on increasing the partnerships between the colleges and apprenticeship programs. Senator Braun and I have one on expanding this certain tax advantage savings accounts to be used for skills training, apprenticeships, as well as some degrees in these areas. Talk about what you think we could be doing better.
Well, I think the policies you're discussing are exactly what I'd say any learner who's coming to a two-year college would want to see enacted. There's no question, I'd say building on the prior testimony, that pre-apprenticeships are so critical. Mm-hmm. We do that with our school districts, our dual credit. We work with 135 high schools. What's important about those high schools is that we're training them and we're exposing them, many of the students, to certainly working opportunities while they're in high school and certainly when they come to college because they're taking these dual credit classes. But we're also helping them earn at the same time. So when you talk about savings, how important that is, not only, and I would just want to say, not only for these initial training expenses and experiences, we know that this is lifelong training. This is not a one and done. It's not 1 in 5 years and done. So we know that we have a third of our learners at the college already have degrees. They may be marketing degrees, but they're often nursing degrees and seeking, there might not be other financial aid allowances
Okay,
for.
thank you. Both my dad got a 2-year community college degree, as did my sister, and she got her GED first, so our family wouldn't be around if it wasn't for 2-year degrees, so thank you. Last, Dr. Holtz-Eakin, you touched on it a bit, but the importance of immigration reform right now. No great nation has expanded, as far as I know, with the shrinking workforce. And I don't think we want to be the first experiment when you look at the numbers. And so get their degrees here. I think we have 12 Republicans on it. Talk about that quick.
I could talk about that for 2 hours, but the 30-second version is that there is no more important economic policy than immigration reform, period. The native-born population has sub-replacement fertility. Our future will be dictated by our immigration decisions. The pace at which the labor force grows, the skills that are embedded in it, everything is about immigration. The current system is broken, and a comprehensive reform would be great, but if you can't get that, anything that will provide greater flexibility in the use of skills in the U.S., letting the spouses of H-1B recipients work, things like that.
Not have to wait 5 years, because then they're all
Right.
going to Canada, because they can
The list goes
work at
on and
yeah.
on, so I encourage you to pursue this in any form you can.
Okay, thank you.
Senator Schmidt.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you all for being here. I guess what I wanted to do in the limited time that I have is just, you guys are all dealing with, well, especially this side, or sort of, you guys are looking at the numbers, but you guys are kind of dealing with a lot of downstream effects that are certainly beyond your control, but certainly some decisions that have been made. This is my first Congress, my first term in the Senate, but certainly a lot of decisions that have been made. have had an impact. And I think it is important for us to acknowledge, I think, some of the fear mongering that happens that drives a lot of the dollar. Time Bomb and released a report of reports on the dire status of global climate, describing a multi-million-dollar plan to implement climate change policies across the globe. The Secretary General called the report a survival guide for humanity. To him, the era of global warming has ended. The era of global boiling has arrived. And the United States has spent $5 trillion, with a T, trillion dollars, that now has downstream impacts that some of you are dealing with, whether it's retraining or apprenticeships. I do want to ask the question, and I don't know who the best person to ask. So, Doctor, I'm going to I'm going to pick on you or ask you this question, and I do. We've spent this amount of money, and I think the number is, in order to affect temperatures by 1/3 of a degree Fahrenheit, the amount of money that the United States would have to spend to do this, even if you accepted that premise, is nuts. There's a trade-off. There's opportunity costs, right? We're talking about money for training programs, and here we are now driving investment in other places, including China, where a lot of these rare earth materials are mined. We've hollowed out the middle class for a lot of these industrial jobs that have gone other places. But as it relates specifically to this, whether it's for wind energy or solar, if you accepted the idea that we're controlling the weather, if China and India are not on board with this, which they are not, I mean, they're building coal-fired plants, 3 a month, 3 a month. What are we doing? Is this a trade-off? This money, in your expert opinion here of how we're spending money, is there a return here other than a loss of jobs that we have to retrain people for?
So I am a long-time participant in the debate over climate change and have done this at the CBO, the McCain campaign, and more recently. And I believe the current strategy is not going to be effective. The idea that you can simply subsidize everything and get the U.S. to a clean energy portfolio, I think, is mistaken. I'm not going to belabor it, but I think that it's not going to work. And the lack of international buy-in means that it'll be futile in the end from a
transition to a green job. And I think that, and you don't, Mr. Eichhorst, you don't have to comment on this if you don't want to. This is probably more of a statement. I think what we're seeing play out right now in the auto industry is sort of the tip of the iceberg. Ford Motor Company lost $4.5 billion on their EV vehicle. I have a Wentzville plant. In Wentzville in Missouri, there's a GM plant. $4.5 billion would go a long way, I think, in having the parties come together. And my big concern here is that this obsession with this agenda is going to continue to bleed jobs. And we're going to keep having to have conversations about what sort of retraining makes the most sense, whereas if we were making better decisions here, we wouldn't need to have this hearing. So thank you for being here.
Mr. Eichhorst, if you want to comment.
Yeah, feel free. I just didn't, I know that's not why you're here to testify, but it is certainly something near and dear, I know, as a union guy. Yeah.
Can I add one thing?
Sure.
Absolutely.
In terms of downstream consequences, I think the one that should not be forgotten in this setting is a lot of these efforts are making up for failures of the K-12 education system. And the most important thing we could do would be to take on and improve that system. I mean, the evidence is overwhelming that it had failed for 10 straight years and got worse in the pandemic. And so having to train someone in a 2 or 4 year setting because they didn't learn anything in school is a real problem.
Mr. Eichhorst, I'm going to ask you to answer his question. Are you seeing jobs go away in New Mexico because of these policies, or are you seeing demand for jobs?
Thank you. I'll answer it to the best of my ability. We're seeing a higher demand for jobs because of this. One of the nice things is everything that we build, whether it's green technology or coal burner, requires maintenance. So I will not be in the labor pool in 20 years from now, but I see the transition there. A lot of these folks have developed through the years. And when I first started in the welding industry, it was nothing compared to like it is now. So in 20-something years, we've learned new technology, we've changed it up, and I see within the next 20 years, it'll be totally different again. So it's a good opportunity to learn now.
Thank you, Mr. Ikorst. Representative Moore.
Thank you so much, Mr. Chairman, and let me just thank all of the witnesses for participating in this very, very important topic. I was able to peruse some of the testimony that I may have missed, given my late departure, but from what I can gather, Mr. Holtz-Eakin, and welcome back to the Joint Economic Committee.
Thank you.
You're no stranger here. You and Dr. Beach are basically saying that a young person who graduates high school and maybe somehow gravitates into a private business is no better off or worse off than someone who has gone through, say, the community college with Ms. Hartzler and learned some skills or picked up a certificate or gone through some of the community-based programming. And I just want to be clear, you say all the data and that, maybe some great for society, positive benefit to society as a whole, but that training had a negative benefit. And so that, and then the notion that the private sector is so much better prepared to train people for jobs that are wanted at that time. And I'm sort of confused as to how people find out about the Gwenmore company that wants.
Agree that that's a fair characterization of my testimony, except for one thing. I think the community colleges stand out as the successful actors in this field. I mean, they really have been good at identifying the opportunities in the area, the skills needed for those employers, taking individuals who may have finished high school, may not have, may have left another job and getting them into the labor force successfully and getting them employed. That's the success story. The failure is especially the Workforce Innovation Opportunity Act, the one-stop shops, and where people just walk in and say, I need to get a job, I can't get a job, help me. We don't help them.
Okay.
And you should be upset. I mean, that's not a good thing.
I'm not getting upset. What about we had the National Association of Building Trade Unions and stuff like what Mr. Ikorst is doing. How would you characterize they are spending like, did you say $280 million or something a year for training? Is that a waste of money that they're in the private sector?
No. Again, those are the ones that work, and those should be applauded and supported, and we shouldn't expand the other ones.
Okay. Then so listen, my time is waning. So let me ask. I'm very curious because I don't know who said it, but someone was in here talking about providing these kinds of trainings to TANF recipients. Those are the poorest of the poor. Is that an example of people who would be better off? Self-esteem, I've heard all kinds of training programs for people who are on TANF, help them with personal problems that they may have, like alcoholism and so forth, but these training programs which have these benefit cliffs and time limits, this is wasted money.
Scientific studies where they do randomized control tests indicates that the value of those government programs that are run by the government in government agencies is not positive. Now, that doesn't mean that they don't do some people some good for a while. But over their lifetime, there's not that much of an improvement. However, studies also indicate that the real bang for the buck comes when you partner with businesses, you partner with labor unions that know what jobs are needed because consumers are giving them signals, and then we partner with the educational establishment to deploy that training in a cost-effective way. That is effective. So if you want an effective program, rely on the private sector, rely on that partnership, get away from programs that are directly run by the government, because I think all the evidence seems to be pretty much coming in with, well, it's just not proved out to be as good a thing as we thought it would be. Well-intentioned, but we're just not quite delivering.
My time has expired, but I will extend to myself some personal privileges to be able to say that The only kinds of programs I can think of that are really run just exclusively by government are these programs for poor people like TANF, where they have you, raking up the leaves in Central Park and then dump them back on the ground so the next welfare workers can learn how to have dignity and scrape them. So, Mr. Chairman, thank you for your indulgence, and I yield back.
Representative Byer.
Mr. Chairman, thank you very much. And Mr. Ranking Member, I appreciate this. And really important topic, and I'm fascinated by it. Let me quote our president right now, who said many times, the middle class built America and unions built the middle class. And what we've seen as union membership has gone down over the last 50 years, the income gap has grown ever larger between the average American and the top. And our middle class has gotten smaller and smaller. And you hear virtually every article talks about how many people feel the American dream isn't reachable anymore. So, Mr. Eichhorst, how do we stimulate?
That grows union jobs well is project labor agreements. To have some of these that include registered apprenticeship programs. I've seen individual companies come from all over the United States, and they'll set up shop and they'll say, we've got an apprenticeship program. There's no program set in place. There's no standards set in place. There's no way that these students are advancing, but they call it a registered program. The registered apprenticeship programs that are approved by the government, that are actually looked at and were audited quite often, they do require certain steps. You have to pass certain, either it's an ability test or a written test. There's always methods to this. Once you can pass these, you continue to move on. Having those in place helps a ton. That really does require more apprentices. We can have 1 million jobs out there, but if these jobs don't have a way to require apprentices, how are we going to train these individuals to fill these jobs? Our workforce right now in the state of New Mexico, in my local union, our average plumber or pipe fitter is 50 years old. Yeah. Who in the heck should still be working hard in the field at 50 years old? We've got to start training our replacements. That's one of my biggest issues. When we require the registered apprenticeship programs with these legislations or with these bills, that helps train our, I'd say the next 20, 30, 40 years of workforce. That will allow us to get into some of these government agencies and say, look, you're doing a great job training these kids that might have dropped out from. We jump in there, we help them out, we get them through the basics. Once they get through the basics, if they choose to get in an apprenticeship program, that's great. The demand will be there. They will need more apprentices. So the more legislation we can include registered apprenticeship programs, and that's a nice thing. It's both sides. Registered apprenticeship programs are all
to the federal investment in new technologies in terms of what you see the jobs are that are coming.
So we like any jobs. We love to build, whether it's green technology, whether it's old technology. If we are taking an old coal burner down, or if we're remodeling an old coal burner plant in the United States, that still work for us. We love work. The building trades, and especially the UA, we love all construction. And as it turns more green or more environmentally friendly, we're keeping up with those technologies. We love work. We love more and more. The more that happens around the country, the more plants that are built, the happier we are and the more men and women we can put to work.
Great, thank you. Let me pivot to Dr. Holtz-Eakin, who's no stranger here. Doctor, you wrote that the majority of the occupations listed aren't specific to the solar power industry, and that, and certainly my own experience in the retail automobile business is that most of our technicians come with, maybe they had some training in the military, occasionally they had a tech school, but mostly the manufacturers put them through years and years of training. Every quarter somebody's gone for a week learning how to do automatic transmissions or whatever. What implication does this have as we struggle with meaningful trade assistance, trade adjustment assistance? We know that trade agreements and technology have displaced so many workers. We don't seem to have gotten displaced workers.
I would concur with the finding, right? We really have not had a successful trade adjustment assistance program in the United States, in part because it's centered on the establishment, and the establishment being raising his hand saying, we're suffering from trade competition. These workers are going to lose their jobs because of it. They're now eligible for TAA. That's not looking at the person. That's looking at the current occupation and the current establishment. And in fact, The federal training programs do their worst when they're trying to figure out the specific skills for the future that people need.
Training programs, right? And most of us up here don't have a clue about how actually to implement it. You all have real-world experience or the benefit of years of studying. And I would like us to have some way where the folks who have to do it and have some skin in the game, which is employers and ambitious young people who want to get trained, can get into a program that's meaningful. And it seems to me that it does take a design has to include like labor, because there's a real interest labor has in having young people get into the trades. It clearly can involve community college, because that's where our young people who can't, who have aspirations, but oftentimes lower incomes, go to try to take that next step. And it obviously has to include the employers, because if employers don't want to waste their time. They really need workers. So I just want to ask you if there's some way where we could accomplish the training that is absolutely essential and do it in a way better than we can prescriptively from here. And I'll go with you, Dr. Beach. By the way, you're in the Coolidge Foundation?
I am indeed, sir.
So you've been to metropolitan Plymouth, Vermont.
Indeed, I have visited Plymouth.
It's great to see you. But
right.
go ahead, I'll let you start with
Well, I just wanted to
your
say-
Vermont credibility.
Yeah, well,
So-
thank you very much for my association now with Vermont. I expect citizenship soon. So there are a couple of things that I think we ought to do. First off, I sponsored a study through the state of Minnesota when I was commissioner to find out whether the employment service provision could be more exploited than it is, which is to give information to workers about what is happening in the private sector. Now,
That can happen like at community colleges,
amen.
right? 'Cause I mean, I know students are really interested in getting that. But what about this partnership idea? Because as I mentioned, I just don't see how this happens out of partnership. Do you want to start, President Hartzler?
Sure, if I may. Thank you, Mr. Chairman and Representative. So I don't think there's any question that the work that the federal government and the states do that require, and frankly, our industry standards, where there are licensed professionals, require all of us, whether it's the trainer, the employer, and other partners, which could be state government, could be our unions, and certainly our K-12 partners, come together to identify what are the job needs, not only today, but in the future, because our employers are telling us what they need. We use BLS data, but frankly, that's historic. It's not as much as predicting or telling us where we're going. So you have to have employers, and frankly, employers come to us to do the training. So there's always a partnership with employers. So by requiring our advisory committees, our professional organizations for licensing that tell us what to do, what the skills and the competencies are that our learners need at any point in their career, by making to apply for grants, to utilize our resources, whether it's shared facilities. So there's a great deal of oversight from our
But how do we make it
yeah.
work better? I mean, we got to get more folks trained. I mean, including in the trades. You know, there is some money in the Inflation Reduction Act to train on energy efficiency. That was something quite important to a lot of us, especially to me. But you know, if you want to, what they're saying these days, if you want a plumber, you got to marry one, right? So there's an issue here about getting people who could have a really good, well-paying career that gave them the option of staying where they live. Mr. Eichhorst?
These young people, we bring them in. The UA and Navajo Tech started a plumbing program there because a lot of these young men and women have no idea what they're going to do once they graduate high school or a community college. This gives these young people the opportunity. They say, you know, I don't want to leave home yet. I'm helping mom, I'm helping grandma. You know, once I get a real job, I can help them a little further. And if there's some governmental assistance to get them through this program, they go through the community colleges. They come out with a certificate or a degree, which is phenomenal. They get the basic training. They come to us with direct entry and advanced placement. So instead of starting out as a first-year apprentice that doesn't need to know anything, they come in as a second-year apprentice because they've got their basics, they've got their CPR, they've got a bunch of the things needed. So that model works really well. at 18 years old, I had no idea what I was going to do with my life. I'm 47, I still don't know what I'm going to do with my life. I still don't know what I'm going to do when I grow up. But at 18, if some of these young individuals, they don't have to be young, anybody, can go to a community college and say, maybe I'm interested in electrical, maybe I'm interested in welding, maybe I'm interested in plumbing. They go in the weld shop and they burn the heck out of themselves, they're done. They want to become an electrician or a plumber. So this gives them the opportunity to not go into a program and fail. This allows them to think, okay, I don't mind getting wet, but I don't like being shocked or burnt, so I'm going to be a plumber. So this gives some of these people a great opportunity to think, and then they get direct entry into several apprenticeship programs.
Thank you.
Thank you.
We're going to try to do a real quick lightning round of second, just because this has been such a great discussion. Dr. Hartzler, workforce Pell. How would it change things if that were in place tomorrow?
It would give immediate federal aid to individuals seeking training in high-demand industry, I'll say industry certified or in.
One of the places where we should be trying to open the aperture for more training is the partnerships between community colleges and employers. That's one of the places we could open that aperture is the partnerships between the skilled trades and employers. We should be doing more apprenticeship-based or work-based learning. This is super helpful.
Right.
I'm going to turn things over to the Vice Chairman, but thank you all for your time today. I'll have a closing statement, but I think you guys have all been very helpful in this discussion.
And you took all the fun out of it. You basically asked there's a slightly non sequitur, but there's a reason for this. Dr. Holtz-Eakin, if you happen to come across someone who knew their way around the BLS, and you could ask saying, here's my dream, I really need this data set for them to do, what would you ask them to produce?
Oh, I think he already answered the question, and he is the guy who knows his way around the BLS.
Oh, really?
So,
That makes it so much easier.
we in all aspects of documenting the labor force rely on too many one-year snapshots and not enough studies of the dynamics of individuals through their careers. And there are education, entry, exit, job, entry, exit, incentives to do things, and what the gaps.
Right,
For both you, but I also, we have a bunch of freaky smart economists on joint economic.
you do.
What could we also research? What do we do to understand what's really going on? You know, and part of my is self-serving. I have a fascination right now with demographics.
Area, it's not intellectually hard to do, it's just bureaucratically hard to do. So that's the first thing. Secondly, when I was commissioner, I supported 52 labor market information systems around the country. There are state-level organizations that collect data and then propagate that data through the UI system and through state organizations. They are dying for a little larger mission statement. Many of them I've supported through grants to do that larger work, to actually look at how they could expand our knowledge of the demand for labor, the supply for labor, the training requirements, the apprenticeship opportunities. So I think better supporting the labor market information system, which has existed since the Wagner Act in one form or another, is an area of extremely low cost but high return for all of our labor questions.
We've had sort of a radical side discussion of how much of some of this base level data could be almost crowdsourced,
Right.
not collected in the
lot.
traditional survey method.
Yeah, a lot.
And therefore, it would also change the cost
Yeah.
of collection models.
Yeah.
The fact of the matter is, how much of our lives are on this, and this could be one of our most powerful understanding of in and out of labor, where they are geographically, the types of projects they're on. So, and this is not Democrat or Republican, it's just, we often lack a lot of the tools to be intellectually credible on the things we absolutely know are true. Closest I'm going to come to giving a closing statement is, I love this committee. I want us to do good things, and then you and I will fight through the partisan divide later. But right now, our battle is knowing what's the actual facts. You know, what is my actual labor shortage? What is my actual shortage of available labor? You know, and then we'll do skill set districts start to shrink. The reality's here. Now we got to figure out how to deal with it. And with that, I yield to you.
One of the great things about this committee is the vice chairman and I agree that data is a good thing. Representative Moore for the lightning round.
Lightning round. Let me pick up where Representative Swigert led off. You know, to say that there's shrinking population, that's in Arizona. That there's a very fast-growing population of Hispanics in this country. There are African Americans, there are labor shortages, not because we don't have people, but because people don't have these skills. Am I wrong about that? They're people, but they need the skill set. What role does government have in helping get people through the pipeline? Dr. Holtz-Eakin has already said, you know, that they need to, I still have the little clock my boy made in shop. It's kind of raggedy right now, but I still have it. We need to invest more in the K through 12 public education system because people graduate from high school, they don't, you know, even though you say there's no such thing as a green job, you know, they might think it's really cool to work on solar if they knew about it. So what role does government have?
Let me just back into the immigration question again. Fact, we think it's a fact. Last year, that would be 2022, the labor force grew by around 2 million, just around there. 900,000 because of natural people born in the United States, 1.1 million because of people coming from other countries to the United States. The UN projects that the United States, if it has a reasonable immigration policy in place, will be one of the fastest growing countries in the world. By 2100, while China and India are actually shrinking, the United States is supposed to grow, but almost all of that growth is from immigration. So if that's the case, then the edge today, it's not going to be a government program. It's going to be all local, and it's going to be all through colleges and community colleges in our educational system.
Well, I mean, that's government too. They got to be funded some kind of way.
Well, I think they do have to be funded in some fashion, but you got to be careful not to direct those programs because we are a big country with lots of pockets of cultures that are very different from one another, but from a standpoint of population, I want to persuade this committee not to think about the population shrinking. That's not our problem. That's India's problem. That's China's problem. Our population our problem is it's going to be growing like Kenya's. We're going to be the fastest growing population in the world by 2100. So yeah, we've got some really interesting challenges ahead of us on that front.
Thank you all so much. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Senator Welch.
Well, I was impressed with the three things everybody agreed on. So what are the problems? I didn't get a chance to ask you, Dr. Holtz-Eakin. What are the problems with the existing the job training programs? You probably went through this, but just very quickly.
So I think my written testimony has reference to a 2019 study that I did with a colleague, and what really stands out is the mismatch between the skills that are being delivered in those training programs and the things that are needed by employers. We're training for jobs that don't exist anymore, and we're not training for the jobs where it doesn't want. It's not going to work.
So does that argue for something like what Dr. Beach is talking about with decentralized in local administration?
It argues to be on that side of the table where they're paying attention to what the employers need. Seriously.
Yeah. Well, thank you.
That is the future, Senator, is to, in a very constructive and non-invasive way, is going to be the key role that the federal government will play in the future. Its profile in job training will shrink, while the profile of the local organizations will grow, and that's exactly the way it has to be.
And you feel comfortable with that, the community college level, at the union level?
Yes.
If I could add just one thing, you asked him at one point sort of what should be in a program, and I just want to emphasize something that was in Dr. Beach's testimony. Every program should have built into it program evaluation. The key is not starting things. The key is stopping things that aren't working. And the ones that I reviewed are still there, and they're still funded, and they're not working. That money should be going somewhere else.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
I want to say thanks to our witnesses. This has been a great conversation. I think we got a lot out of it. Thanks to our colleagues who came today. Questions for the record may be submitted after the hearing. The record will remain open for 3 business days from now, and this hearing is now adjourned.